spend every Sunday just living good. Might do a little fishing, a little hunting on the weekend. With a bow I'll be sneaking back in the woods. A little bit crazy, every now and then maybe. Like to kick off my boots and get lazy, but I'm living good, yeah.
This episode of Pathfinder Outdoor Journal is being brought to you by Self-Reliance Outfitters, the Pathfinder School, Duluth Pack, Battle Horse Knives, Short Lane Arms, Lansky, Survival Resources, Carbon TV, and Survival Life.
From hunting to fishing to camping to survival, Self-Reliance Outfitters has the quality outdoor gear to help you and your family make the most of your next outdoor adventure. Visit us online at www.selfrelianceoutfitters.com. Outdoor gear for outdoor people.
At the Pathfinder School in Southeast Ohio, we train hundreds of people each year in short-term emergency survival, emergency preparedness, self-reliance, and sustainability. We train individuals, families, and groups with low instructor-to-student ratios to guarantee the best possible training environment for your money. To join us for an upcoming class, please visit our website at thepathfinderschoolllc.com.
Duluth Pack, handcrafted in Duluth, Minnesota since 1882. True outdoorsmen like Dave Canterbury have been using our canvas and leather products for over 130 years. Our American-made, time-tested craftsmanship makes Duluth Pack the only gear you'll need for your next adventure. Hunting, fishing, bushcrafting, camping, canoeing, business gear, backpacks, all this and more at duluthpack.com.
As we explore the woodsmen of the past and look at the equipment and accoutrements they carried and how they utilized that gear, we'll move forward now from the 1750s into later era, post-Revolutionary War, pre-Civil War. And that was when the fur trade era truly began. There were lots of long hunts and things like that in the 1760s that are recorded where men went out working for different trade companies and different traders to harvest deer and buffalo, both for the British garrison and for what was called the deer skin or the red deer skin. And a red deer skin was a summer deer skin. You would scrape the hair side off, scrape the gut side off, and let that turn to rawhide, and that was considered a green deer skin, and that was a highly valued trade item of the mid-1700s, along with buffalo beef that would be traded to places like the British garrisons and things like that along the frontier. So not only did we have the woodsman who was providing meat for his family on a daily basis, you also had the woodsman who was making a living off the land. He was working for someone else or working for himself in some cases, like some of Daniel Boone's parties, on long hunts to bring back deer hides to sell them to make money to provide for their family. So the accoutrements and things that they carried with them, mostly by pack train of horses, would be what they needed to carry for the long term, for their survivability and for their sustainability. As we move forward in history, you had the same things going on post-Revolutionary War, but now you got into the point where things were being trapped more prominently. There were traps that were carried during the 18th century that are recorded. 4 beaver traps per man per horse, things of that nature from historical ledgers. But beginning in the early 1800s, 1820s to 1830s, the fur trade really started to boom, especially with things like the beaver. When we think about the fur trade era, the first thing that comes to mind is the beaver. The beaver and beaver trapping are icons of the fur trade era. In truth, the beaver and the popularity of the beaver for making felted hats from the guard hairs in Europe was very short-lived compared to many other sources of fur from different animals. The raccoon far surpassed the beaver as far as being exported in sheer numbers and the value over time of that animal paid to trappers right here in eastern woodlands in the Ohio Valley of Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. William Hamilton Gibson's book, Camp Life in the Woods, was geared toward the trapping campaign. He wrote about the gear and accoutrements that needed to be carried by a small party or an individual who was going to trap to make money. The reverse side of that coin, George Washington Sears, or Nesmith, was the pioneer of ultralight camping in the same time period. He was slight of stature, only being 5'3" and about 115 pounds. He was also not of the best health. So he had to carry items that were light in weight that he could carry over distance to do what he called tramping. One of the things that's so interesting to me about the latter part of the 19th century, and I'm talking post-Civil War to pre-1900s, is that you had a great melding of cultures at that point, where you had the Industrial Revolution in full swing. So you had people who were escaping the hustle and bustle of city life by recreational camping, recreational hunting, fishing, and things of that nature. And you also had the die-hard woodsman who was still trying to make his living off the land by trapping. So it's with this cultural melding that we can learn. We can learn what was carried and what was necessary for us to live off the land in that time period, but we can also learn what was taken in the woods that was considered only necessities for an enjoyable trip of camping or tramping. Hamilton Gibson wrote in the context of the expeditionary trapper. He understood that larger tools would most likely be needed because larger materials would need to be processed over time for more permanent structures, for trapping, for burying trapping stakes, for processing large firewood and things of that nature. Whereas George Washington Sears was a recreational tramper who kept a small camp, small fires, only warming fires or fires throughout the night, and he wasn't planning to stay long term. Most of his camping did not take place in the dead of winter, whereas trapping would take place during the winter months. So the two different mentalities of equipment were very different, but both born out of necessity. Battle Horse knives are heirloom quality knives, built for the outdoorsman by outdoorsmen. With years of experience, Battle Horse makes the best quality knives on the market today and stand behind their knives with a 100% lifetime guarantee. From the PLSK Scout to the Trapline Companion to the Nesmith and everything in between, Battle Horse can make a knife to fit your needs. Whether I'm hunting, fishing, trapping, or just recreational camping, a Battle Horse knife is always on my side. And short lane arms with sub-caliber adapters, they make your single shot 12-gauge shotgun a one and done for your hunting arsenal. With everything from rimfire cartridges in 22 long rifle to 17 HMR to centerfire pistol cartridges in 38 caliber to 45 ACP. The greatest versatility with the short lane arm sub-caliber adapter is in the 8-inch rifled adapter models. You can match your sidearm to your 12-gauge shotgun with an 8-inch rifled adapter to make it even more versatile than a shotgun alone.
Hi, I'm John McCann from Survival Resources. We specialize in custom survival kits, all the components necessary to build your own survival kit, and emergency preparedness products. Check us out at survivalresources.com.
One thing that we see when we look at historical writings and documentation is that almost all woodsmen preferred to carry some type of axe. Some smaller, some larger. If they had the means of conveyance, like a pack train of horses, canoes, wagons, and things of that nature, they would carry a larger felling axe. If they were on an expeditionary journey, like a trapping expedition, they would carry a slightly larger trapper's axe. If they were walking afoot, it may be a smaller hatchet type axe. And sometimes in the 1700s, early 1800s, they would carry what was called the tomahawk. And the tomahawk is different than an axe. So let's look at those right now. So what I have here are two cutting implements approximately the same size. This head is a little larger on this trapper's axe and the handle is a little heavier. This is what was considered a tomahawk. The tomahawk would give the woodsman great advantage over an axe or hatchet of the same size. Because the handle was easily removable, it gave him a multifunctional tool that he could use for skinning or scraping as well as a wedge. Because the handle was easily put into place and taken out, it could be easily replaced if broken or damaged. The tomahawk was also used as a defensive weapon along the frontier. The axe, on the other hand, has a handle that comes up through the bottom of the head and doesn't go down through the top of the eye. It goes through the bottom, it's tapered, and then wedged in place like this one is with two metal wedges. Now the advantage of the axe is it was a more robust tool, generally heavier duty even if it was the same size. The head was generally a little bit heavier and the handle was made of stronger material or heavier material. But again, it was also made of wood so that it could be readily replaced if something were to happen to it in the woods. This is two examples of larger axes considered to be a forest or cruising type axe. An axe like this would have been easily carried if you had conveyance and could be very useful over the longer term for building shelter and processing larger amounts of wood. The best thing that you can do to fit an axe to yourself if you're buying a larger style axe that you're going to carry is to check the length of the handle of that axe against your body. And if you tuck that handle into your armpit and you can cup the front of that axe like I am now, that axe pretty much should be fitted to your body size. There's not a lot of historical evidence pre-1800 into the mid-1800s of lone travelers carrying saws. Saws would have been used at areas where station camps and things like that were built where pack trains were involved, but those were more cross-cutting type saws. You don't see the bow saws and things of that nature, folding saws that we use today, in use at that time. Now we know today that saws, A, are much safer to use than an axe. They take less energy to use than an axe, and they are lighter and more portable than an axe. But the axe affords several main advantages over the saw. It's easier to maintain and sharpen than a saw, and it has much more versatility than a saw in that it can be used for anything from fine carving and skinning to processing the smallest of tinders to the largest of campfire woods. It can also be used with the hammer pole for nails, stakes, or even pulverizing nuts and meat to make foods like pemmican. A large axe like this one is a lifetime tool. If you can find one that is forged in the US or Sweden, that will be the best axe you can buy for your money. An axe can be a dangerous tool as well, and there's certain things that you need to remember safety-wise when you're processing wood. One thing that we always have to think about when we're processing wood with our axe is where that axe is going to fall if it were to miss. So if we stand up and we miss, is it going to drive into our leg on either side? So the best thing that we can do is get on our knees and get the length of the axe so that if it misses or glances, it goes into the ground on either side, and chop our wood that way. A small trapper's axe like this one, and I say small because this one is about 17 inches in handle length. A typical hunter or trapper's axe would be more of the 19 to 20 inch range. But an axe like this one would fit very well into your bedroll. It would also slide down into a pack basket. A tool like this would become the multi-tool of the trapper. It could be used not only to set up traps or construct traps, but also to build cubbies and hides, to dig trap beds if necessary, then to make and drive the stakes to secure that trap in place, and ultimately used to assist in the skinning process of his quarry. The greater majority of information we have on trappers and trappers' accoutrements prior to the Civil War comes from diaries and journal entries, as well as trade house ledgers and things of that nature. There were really no books out there written on the subject of steel trapping and trapping in the fur trade per se. We understand that the traps were made of metal and that they were very heavy. There are journal entries as far back as the 1760s talking about beaver traps made of metal that were carried 4 per man per horse. We also understand that the majority of the time conveyance was used when a trap line was being employed because the traps were heavy and you had to carry multiples of these traps, understanding that percentage was the game. The more traps you had, the more animals you could trap, and the more chance you had of catching animals. So carrying 4 traps per man back in the 1700s probably was a way of gathering meat sources and food as much as it was to further their income. But later in the period, in the 1820s and 1830s, when beaver trapping became very popular, they would carry many more traps than 3 or 4 per man. Now we also know that most of the trapping took place on horseback, that we read about in journals and diaries and stories and things of that nature. So the lone trapper, or the single man walking afoot, we don't have a lot of information on what he would have carried. I can tell you from personal experience that anything more than about a dozen steel traps, along with the accoutrements you would need to stay in the woods for the amount of time to run a trap line for even a week, can be very overbearing as far as weight goes. It's fairly safe to say that the trapper would have supplemented his traps, his steel traps, with makeshift traps off the landscape as well. So he would not necessarily have to carry as many traps to be able to employ more traps, as long as he had the woodsy knowledge to use the landscape to his advantage. Steel traps come in lots of varieties, but the most reminiscent trap to what was used in the early 1800s, the beaver trap, would be what's called the double long spring. And the double long spring trap has a spring on each side of the trap. Now, many of the forged traps that I've seen from the period of the late early 1800s were a single spring type trap, and many of those are used even today, and that's why they're called a single long spring or double long spring. They either had a spring on one side of the trap jaws or both sides. The older traps that I've seen generally do not have a one-piece spring like this one does. Generally, the frame was extended out and one piece of spring steel came up over the top of the jaws where the eye is here, that would push down to enable you to set the trap, to break it down. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. Period examples that I've seen look very similar to this, other than the shape of the pan, in that they have what's called a dog, which is a levering device here, that the jaw gets trapped underneath of to hold the jaw down. And then you had a pan here with a notch that would lift up onto the dog, just like this, and the pressure of that jaw pushing up would hold tension on that to hold that pan in place. And when the pan was stepped on by the animal, it would release the dog and then release the jaw of that trap. And this was called the strong jaw side. The opposite side jaw was the weak jaw. It had no tension on it whatsoever, but when the spring rose up, this eye would close both jaws at the same time. A trap like this that was large enough to capture a beaver would take quite a bit of hand strength in order to set. And they didn't use trap setters like we have today to aid them in trap setting. It was done with their bare hands. And you would break the springs down, which would let the jaws flop loose. You would then move the weak jaw out of your way, hold the strong jaw down, moving the dog over the top and pushing the pan up underneath like this. Then when you let go, you would center the pan and that trap would be under tension. Now this weak jaw would not open up all the way down and stay flat until you move these springs forward toward the dog, and that would allow it to lay flat. And you would want that pan to be fairly level in position, and then this trap would be employed in or near the water. Traps like this one were called foothold type traps. They have been misnomered and called leg hold traps for years and years, but they were actually designed to capture the animal by the foot. If you look at the distance between the pan and the top of these jaws, and again, this is a beaver-sized trap. So if the beaver puts his foot in here, and a beaver has a foot about this big around, when he puts his foot in and touches this pan, these trap jaws are going to close on his foot, not up on his leg. So using the correct size trap for the correct size animal is also very important. The trap would then generally be tied off, generally to what was called a drowning cable or a drowning wire, so that it would travel down a wire but could not come back up, so that once the animal was trapped in the trap by the foot, he would swim toward deep water and not be able to swim back up to the shallow water, and the trap would drown the animal, so that the animal was not alive when the trapper got there. Most of these type traps would have been employed at den exits or den entrances, especially for beaver, and then sometimes along the bank in some type of a false cubby that was kicked into the bank or dug into the side of the bank and baited with some type of food. Newer traps like this Minnesota brand 550 employ 2 coil springs instead of long springs to close the ears and then close the jaws. The improvements to traps like this are not only is it smaller in dimensions, so it can be carried in a smaller space to carry more traps, but it's also made to be more humane on the animal that's being trapped. You can see that it has what's called an offset jaw, and the jaw does not close all the way shut like the old style steel traps. So when it closes to the bone on the hand of the animal, it stops at that bone. It also has a thick cast jaw with wider surface area here, so that when it does close around the animal, it's not cutting into the animal because you have a wider space of surface area contacting the skin. And a trap like this works exactly like the other style trap, where you open the ears. Instead of compressing the springs, you're stretching these springs down by compressing these ears. You would then open that strong jaw and hold it down with your hand, pushing the dog over the top. You would then go under the weak jaw and lift the pan up, and now this trap is in a safe position. Even if I close this trap, when I close this down, you'll see that, you'll hear it click, and it has what's called a night latching system. And that's so if you're setting that trap at night, you know where the pan is level. Now with a trap like this or any other trap, the weak jaw is the key to safety when you're setting these traps. As long as that weak jaw is up and out of the way, even if you were to set off this trap, it's not going to catch your fingers because your fingers are not inside the jaws of that trap. They're underneath the weak jaw. This week's survival tip on Pathfinder Outdoor Journal is brought to you by Carbon TV. A great majority of the traps mentioned in Hamilton's book are deadfalling type traps, not snares. Deadfalls gave the trapper an advantage of killing the animal almost instantaneously or suffocating the animal very quickly, so that when the trapper arrived, the animal was dead and he wasn't dealing with a live wild animal. In this case, we have a simple scissor type trap that is counterbalanced with weight, set with a trigger with a push rod that releases the trigger. I'm going to show you how to set this up and the simplistic triggering mechanism, and then we'll set up the full trap as it would be for trapping animals and show you what that looks like as well. Remember that any deadfalling device that you use as a trap has to be 5 times heavier approximately than the animal you're trying to kill. So if you have a 5-pound possum going into this trap, you're going to have a 25-pound deadfall to kill that animal. We can then cut a large deadfall, and this is about a 5-foot long green piece of wood, so it's fairly heavy, and we're going to compound the weight of this shortly. We have to tie a trigger stick, and it's just a piece of stick that is less than the length from here to here on our cross stick to our anvil, and that trigger stick has to be less than that length where it's tied off, and then it's tied close to this deadfalling device, and this deadfalling device will go in between like this. And we want to get it to the point where it's going to almost balance in there once we put something on top of the other end. And we're going to put our trigger stick inside here and lift this up at the same time. And some of this stuff can be fairly tedious. And we can set this to a hair trigger later, as long as we get it where we want it to begin with. Now this is our short end of our deadfall. We're going to take another heavy green log and place it on top of that to counterbalance it. But it'll also add about 6 or 8 pounds of weight. Once we've set our trigger in place, we want to make sure that the slide bar or the release bar that he's going to have to belly or crawl over doesn't have a significant amount of space between the anvil and that release bar. You have to fence this in a little bit and make that animal go where you want him to go. So once you've finished, you've basically built a hide. And you'll bait the back of this hide so that the animal has to go up over this triggering stick to get to the bait. Well, folks, I'm Dave Canterbury with Pathfinder Outdoor Journal. I thank you for joining us out here today for another episode. We really appreciate your support, and we appreciate your views. God bless you. God bless your family. Do us a favor. Take a kid outdoors. You won't regret it. And we'll see you on the next episode of Pathfinder Outdoor Journal. Folks, I'm Dave Canterbury with Pathfinder Outdoor Journal. I thank you for joining us out here for another episode today. God bless you. God bless your family. Do me a favor. Take a kid to the woods, and we'll see you on the next episode